Research case study by Katasha Brown. Sullivan versus New York Times. The two parties involved in the dispute were L.B. Sullivan and New York Times. The cause of the dispute was due to an advertisement published by the New York Times titled "Heed the Rising Voices," describing the actions police officers of Montgomery, Alabama took against civil rights protesters. Despite the ad never mentioning Sullivan's name, he believed the ad was referring to him in its context because of the title he upheld. Sullivan sued the New York Times for defamation, stating the ad was false and tainted his reputation. Sullivan felt the statements made in the advertisement damaged both his reputation and profession. But Sullivan did not have actual proof of damage to his reputation. The courts did, however, find files stating the Times had articles already published which would have demonstrated the falsity of the allegations in the advertisement. Sullivan stated the advertisement published by the New York Times provided falsified information targeting him indirectly. He argued that the New York Times did not verify their information and did not check their sources. He also argued that his reputation had been harmed shortly after the release of the advertisement. Since Sullivan was a public official, he had to prove the information the New York Times had released was false and there was actual malice towards Sullivan. Although the New York Times did provide false information in their ad, the court found there was no implication of the New York Times accusing Sullivan for said content in their ad. The New York Times won their case against Sullivan because Sullivan failed to prove that there was any act of malice geared towards him. He also could not prove the New York Times was implying their ad was targeting him as an individual. This case showed the New York Times exercising their First Amendment rights of protection for the publication of all statements made, whether true or false, unless actual malice has been proven. Gertz versus Welch. The parties involved in the case are the petitioner, Elmer Gertz, and the respondent, Robert Welch. Gertz represented the family of the publicized trial of Nelson, a child, against Nucio, a Chicago police officer convicted of murder. Gertz was not considered a public figure. The defamatory statements made about Gertz in the American Opinion article was Gertz had been part of the Marxist League of Industrial Democracy. He was a Leninist and a communist fronter. He was an officer of the National Lawyers Guild, which the author described as a communist organization that allegedly planned the communist attack on the Chicago police during the 1968 Democratic Convention. He had a criminal record. There was no proof that Gertz had a criminal record. There was also no evidence of Gertz being a Leninist or a communist fronter. He never was a member of the Marxist League for Industrial Democracy. The respondents never made an effort to verify the allegations stated against Gertz. Gertz claimed the falsified information in the article damaged his reputation as both a lawyer and a citizen. Gertz was not a well-known lawyer, so the defamation only spoke of him negatively in the public, which could have hurt his reputation. When it comes to this case, I would have made sure I got the facts. I would not have provided the public with falsified information, and I would have provided factual information in my article. I also would have compiled that information through video, voice recordings, and any other documents to back up my claims in order to avoid a lawsuit. Florida's defamation claims are the defendant published a false statement about the plaintiff to a third party and the falsity of the statement caused injury to the plaintiff. Through both cases, I learned that I cannot use my status of a public figure as a crutch to avoid losing a defamation case, and I cannot use the public as an excuse to write and publish falsified information. I must always check my sources and provide as much evidence as I can in case a situation like Sullivan and Gertz may arise.